There is a medicine, but people don't want it. They're willing to probably risk big losses that way rather than just do the smart thing.
Yes, it's true. It would be much more meaningful to people to have a longer investment horizon, especially if they're young.
Robo-advisory came on the radar as something that we knew that the banks were thinking about. Now we can push a button and get professionals to make more money from a lot of money. How can we do the same, but for people who sort of actually need the advice? It's not just a question of building the right product or having the right kind of distribution or partners. Actually, it has a lot to do with what the consumers want. The big promise actually of generative AI is potentially to help on the psychological side. These LLMs are an aggregation of broadly best practices. So that gives me hope.
Welcome to the Pulse Check podcast, Aki Ranin. Great to have you here with us in Singapore.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're sort of an entrepreneur, but also a tech geek, similar to myself, and investor. You've had an amazing journey the past 20 years. But before we dive right into that, you know me. I start with an icebreaker. So what makes you you?
Yeah, I'm now 43, and so I've thought about this a little bit more like in the past few years, as everybody does, I guess, right? Like it's a mid-career point. You've done 20 years and probably do at least another 20, or if not more. And it's kind of an abstract thing, but I actually think it's quite true, which is that I think the sort of unique skill that I have is synthesis. Sounds like a kind of oddly specific thing, but I think it's like I enjoy consuming a wide variety of information and then trying to find what's in common or interesting. So I guess, my brain is functioning a little bit like an LLM that way. But I think if I look at what kinds of things I've done, I think that's actually the common thing, whether it's on the startup side in terms of products or concepts for technology that I've come up with, or definitely on the writing side, reading a lot of history, philosophy, sci-fi, trying to find like relevant lessons, information that I can apply in my life or business. So it kind of comes down to this synthesis, which is my brain is just like always trying to connect the dots with random things. So I think that is kind of a very defining characteristic.
Would you call yourself a nerd at times?
Yeah, I think it. Yeah, earlier in my life when it was unpopular to be a nerd, I was definitely a nerd. Now that it's like popular and like mostly associated with like streamers and gamers, now I kind of like don't identify as much, to be honest. But I probably would qualify as like a tech bro, which is a different variety of geek.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I started at ETH in Zurich, and we were, many of us, called nerds, even though it didn't feel like, and yes, it was once popular, then not anymore. But definitely, I really get inspired by reading your blogs, as well as also your book on Robo-advisory. So with this, I would also love to go a bit into your journey, the life of a tech entrepreneur. Ned Phillips is a good friend of mine who has built Bamboo with you together more than a decade ago. And maybe we start with this, talk about your personal story, reflect on maybe the highs and lows with also Bamboo. And if you can also elaborate on Robo-advisory, the vision you've had and where it went.
Yeah, so it's I think it was a kind of organic opportunity. I didn't come from a fintech background, really. I came from a more classic software background. Started really as a software developer. Actually, even before that, I was a tester, then a software developer, and then Scrum Master. Then went into a little bit like pre-sales, then went into sales management, business management, etc., running like teams or business units. And that landed me in Singapore 11 years ago now. And at that time, I was really more focused on like mobile basically like app development, which was pretty new in like 2014. So doing like enterprise mobility, enterprise apps, that sort of thing. And we did some pretty interesting like marquee clients here in that capacity. I was with an agency called Tiger Spike at the time, Australian agency, which has been acquired since. But, we did like Singapore Press Holdings. So we did the Straits Times apps and websites and the design implementation of that. Something I still enjoy or get a kick out of whenever I use the DBS ATMs. We did the screens for those. So it's kind of fun physical sort of thing to see, to have put in the world where like millions of people are using it. And maybe some people think, oh, this is like nice and it's fresh, or other people just don't think about it at all. But like, somebody put a lot of time and effort to thinking about the icons and the sizes of the buttons and these kind of things. So we did a lot of this kind of usability UX focused thing. But of course, being in Singapore, sort of fintech or financial services is the big industry here. So it was almost inevitable that we would then have, more insurance banking clients. One of my last projects actually in that capacity was Manulife Move, which was the sort of wearable device enabled kind of wellness program that Manulife launched, sort of following AI Vitality, if, a lot of people know about that one. And again, very sort of interesting, innovative concepts. And then I think Robo-advisory sort of came on the radar as something that we knew that the banks were thinking about. And we were talking to the banks about this. And there was a sense that like probably every bank will have to do a robo-advisor at some point, right? Just looking at how things were moving in the US. But it was also clear that they felt it was such a big project that they didn't want like a service provider to just build it for them and then walk away. That it would be kind of a fairly strategic, like core component. And so they were asking basically like, hey, would you build it? Like we might license it if you built it. And so that's kind of the backstory of Bamboo in a way, that it was just a sort of opportunity that formed in the context of what we happened to be doing. And then, we sort of incorporated it and started on that journey. I think there was always two paths of how like robo-advisory could play out, not just with Bamboo, but everywhere. I think one is it ends up being like a sort of incremental digitalization of how wealth management works. Mm-hmm. And so maybe some marginal improvements on back office, middle office, obviously, the sort of apps and websites facilitating a lot of the client and advisor interactions. And that's interesting, but not for me. The other vision of it was, can we actually change the way people sort of view wealth management? Because traditionally it would be like only for wealthy people. That if you are successful and you have saved a lot of money, now we can sort of push a button and get professionals to sort of make more money from a lot of money. But I never had that money, so I never felt this was like a problem that I had. I didn't feel it was like interesting in that way. So I thought like, hey, why is this kind of service only available to wealthy people? They don't actually need it, right? Like they already have the money, exactly. Literally. How can we do the same, but for people who, sort of actually need the advice? And then I think largely has failed, not just with Bamboo, but like everybody. So we at Bamboo ended up mostly doing these kind of incremental projects of facilitating, some level of maybe retail access to wealth management products and services. But we never achieved the kind of scale that was conceptually possible due to a variety of factors. But I think also what I realized also in retrospect is that it's not just sort of a question of building the right product or having the right kind of distribution or partners. Actually, it has a lot to do with what the consumers want. Mm-hmm. I think that was like a wake-up call during COVID, where a lot of people in the retail segment started getting into like day trading and stocks. So they had this huge boom of like Robinhood and these, other stock trading apps, huge volumes of people signing up. And so that was the gateway drug. And from that point, they could have gone into robo-advisory, which they didn't. And instead, they sort of went deeper down the trading rabbit hole. A lot of people got into like options trading. Mm. which can be a good thing, but for most people, I think is closer to like a casino. And so the problem in a way is that like people don't want to eat their vegetables. And this, I think it's not an impossible problem, but it's a much bigger problem, because you might have everything sort of available and people just don't want to eat the vitamins, the vegetables. They want the excitement. They want the, sort of weight loss drug equivalent, right? They want big results immediately. They don't want to have gradual incremental results, getting rid of, credit card debt and gradually saving emergency funds. This is boring. They want to invest in Tesla. They want to, buy call options on NVIDIA. And they're willing to probably risk big losses that way rather than sort of just do the smart thing. So that's I think that's fundamentally the sort of problem, is that there is a medicine, but people don't want it.
That's interesting. Of course, Warren Buffett would always say investment is about time. Of course, the compound interest. And yes, it's true. I mean, no one actually makes, or almost no one makes money with trading and short-term, short-viewed investment. And it would be, of course, much more meaningful to people to have a longer investment horizon, especially if they're young. It's, of course, also a bit easier nowadays with all the ETFs, exchange-traded funds, where you can just take an index fund of, for example, the US VOO, where it's low cost and you also actually spread your risks across the market, and you can buy a few across the globe instead of going into complex portfolio management. Of course, that's then just the equity view. Then there would be bonds and other type of investments. So what do you feel can still be good learnings taken from Robo-advisory into the future of digital wealth for the mass?
Yeah, so I think the area where the innovations still work is this kind of hybrid or bionic advisory mode, because the role of the human advisor is effectively to sort of manage this psychological gap and the sort of maybe biases that people bring in to investment. And the advisor can sort of stand between in a way that, to basically just tell them and manage them in a way to do the smart things, which could be to a large extent automated, but it's the psychology which is currently very difficult to automate. So I think, goal-based investing, that was something I really believed in, because again, when I thought about my situation, having just sort of relocated to Singapore and I sold my house in Finland, I had some money from that, which I absolutely was not going to buy a house in Singapore. And so needed to somehow like invest. And then I thought about like different things I might want to do in the future. And it seemed to me that like having a single portfolio where you just have a bunch of either stocks or different kind of funds, bonds, whatever, ETFs or not, it's hard to say like, 35% of this is actually for my future house down payment and 15% is for like children's education. It's like nobody can manage this kind of like math, internalize it, and understand how to then manage that if you're just looking at like a singular P&L sheet for your portfolio. It's just like doesn't compute. And so goal-based investing, I think, is a big one. So one of the sort of early architectural decisions we made at Bamboo was we wanted to have basically different risk profiles for different goals and different portfolios for different goals. So you could completely sort of manage them separately, because let's say if one of your goals is to buy your dream car, you would have a lot of flexibility potentially on the timing of that. So you could take a lot of risk. Whereas maybe something like your children's education, they need to go to college. They can't have 5 gap years. They can have maybe 1 gap year. But then you need to have relatively low risk and sort of high cash investment into those kind of goals. So this was the sort of conceptual underpinning. And I must say, I don't know what role we really played, if at all, in that. But probably from like 2016 when we started, I think to 2018, 19, I think there was a big shift in the market where initially when we spoke to banks, they were like, we're not so sure about goals. And then I think, if you look today, it's pretty much par for the course. Even I think a lot of retail banks that offer some kind of savings solutions often have like some element of goals there where you can give it a name and a timeline and a target amount, something simple like this. But that's something I like really still believe in, and that was the core of like the R&D side of Bamboo, which in fact continues today. So I'm still working on that because that piece was basically acquired by a company called Goldberry in Germany, which is part of the Franklin Templeton Group, one of the investors at Bamboo. And so we're still continuing down that path, and I think there is potentially, again, with the combination of AI and sort of data around goals, helping just people give the right context for what do you want, when do you need it, how realistic is this, what kind of assumptions can we put in place to make sure that this actually happens and is realistic, and then sort of keeping that updated over time. I think those are still like very relevant, probably to a large degree, like untapped opportunities. But also I feel like this currently, I only see this really happening more in the hybrid advisory space, because, there is a bifurcation still that a large part of the population is in this more like trading ecosystem. So call options are not really relevant for your like retirement goal or whatever. So it's kind of a two sides of the coin. I think we can make progress on the side of this financial planning, but the key thing is to somehow like make it psychologically relevant for all these people who currently just don't care about it. They just think, I want to be rich now. I want to be very rich. I don't want to wait, for compound interest in 20, 30 years.
But it's a very important element, this holistic financial planning, on one hand also to make it easy, digestible and understandable for the normal mass, because they're not as much into investment, and working with charts and showing how it works long term makes it easier to believe. Sometimes even these small compound interest calculators already give a bit of an effect of, oh wow, this is what it does with just a few percent in 40 years from now. But also having the full picture, because sometimes you buy life insurance here, you do a bit of investment there, you have your CPF funds that also have potentially investment products linked into it. And you miss also to link all of that together and see, of course, the full risk exposure. And I always also say, even my bank, the banks I work with and the insurance, it's tough to even see that holistic overview. And then the next thing is to make it, again, be easy, understandable, means that if you come with a recommendation, the bionic advisor, your advisor or your insurance agent, if they can explain it in simple terms, easier to you, instead of hundreds of documents and legal structures to show, hey, this is exactly what it means to you, right? I still feel that there's a lot of work to do and big potential. You mentioned also AI, of course, a big topic to go into. Again, for example, scrapping a lot of information, make it digestible, investor explainer, for example. But there's a lot of other areas. So maybe you can expand a bit on AI and the impact on investments and wealth and banking in general.
Yeah, so I guess to start, the area that I've been interested the past few years, really actually since COVID, we started this program. I was reading and watching a lot of sci-fi at the time. In a lot of sci-fi sort of futuristic scenarios, there's some ability to predict the future. And I was sort of like curious about it, like how hard is it really to predict, for example, financial goals of people? Because let's say if you think of like Western democracies as like, a lot of people would go to college at a certain point of their life. Then they probably get married at some point in their life. They have kids, they buy a house, they do a job, they get promoted. Then at some point, they retire, and at some point they die. And so then you think, okay, what's the probability of these events occurring in your life? Well, death is 100%. That's an easy one. It's only a question of when, but even there's like life expectancies, which have been used in like insurance and even, financial planning for a long time. But then I think if you start kind of looking at all these other events, and I just did research on like, surely some people have looked into this. And it turns out they have. There's like sociologists who study basically like how population groups behave for a variety of reasons. And I was really struck that already in 1927, they were able to predict with 1 minute accuracy how much time you spend on various activities during the day. So like cleaning the house, doing work, commuting to work, watching TV or listening to the radio, playing with your children, cooking, etc. The only thing is that it's all these kind of predictions are a question of like granularity. Like, again, maybe I can tell you, okay, you're going to spend like 12 minutes cleaning on the average day, but I couldn't necessarily say, in which order are you cleaning, or what kind of tools are you using to clean, or when exactly do you start, etc. Right? So same for these life events. If I can say, okay, yeah, like I can just look at the statistics and say, okay, well, 30% of people go to college. How do I know if you're the person who's going to college? Is there some reason, some correlation between these different life events? And that led us down a specific path where we, again, found that there's a certain class of AI called hidden Markov models, which are used to kind of study correlations between longitudinal population studies, or let's say life trajectories. And we built something on this basis, which if I know how your life has played out thus far, I can give you a little bit more of an educated guess of like, okay, well, you're married, you have kids, I can probably give you some confidence of in the next 5 years, are you going to buy another house? Are you going to, what's the probability of unemployment or divorce or, having another child, etc. These kind of things. And I think that's like one direction broadly for AI, is just to use data to give people a little bit more like something to hold on to, where the future isn't just kind of a black hole and complete unknown, right? Mm-hmm. We can pin some things, some support structure to say like, okay, how you're thinking about the future seems realistic or seems unrealistic, right? It would be lovely to say, I'm going to buy a dream car every year and investment real estate every 3 years and also save all my money for retirement. So, but you can't have your cake and eat it too. You have to make these kind of compromises. So I think that's where, again, some combination of simple calculations or rules of thumb, some AI, some local data about where you're living, et cetera, these can be packaged together. So this is like an area that I've been looking into quite a lot. But this is all like this is before like LLMs or generative AI. I think the big promise actually of generative AI is potentially, from where we started the conversation, is to help on the psychological side. Mm-hmm. I'm a big Star Wars fan, and many of the robots, but in particular C-3PO from the original Star Wars, he would have this habit of sort of in bad situations giving the likelihoods of things happening. It's like, oh, do you know we have 1% chance of making it out alive from this asteroid or whatever. And then, of course, the human is always like, shut up, I don't want to hear it. But I think to some degree, like the LLM can have this kind of role where, especially I think young people are using LLMs much more than maybe a lot of people realize, just to ask questions like, hey, how should I lead my life? What should I do with my career, my job? What should I do with my health? What should I do with my finances? And I think that's a really good thing because actually these LLMs are sort of an aggregation of broadly like best practices. So if you say, oh, I'm like day trading and doing this options trading. Well, have you made any money? Well, no, but I plan to make money in the future. Right now, the LLMs are maybe still a little bit like sycophantic sometimes, that they may reinforce whatever behaviors you have. But I think like directionally, I think where we're heading, I see them more as the sort of C3PO saying like, what you're doing just like numbers wise makes no sense. Like, hey, just put this money in these ETFs, and be done with it. Spend your time focusing on your career or your, private life or exercise or something which is more like fruitful rather than spending all this time, studying stocks and actually losing money. So that gives me hope. And again, I think that can plug into like the bionic sort of human advisor side of things. I can probably then unlock a little bit more of this B2C robo-advisor promise, because it's not just a form, it's not just a portfolio. It becomes more of the actual advisory sort of day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, adapting to different situations and actually potentially like speaking to you and kind of understanding you much more than we've done up to this point with something like risk profiling, which has been like very impersonal, I would say.
Mm. You spoke now a lot about B2C and how generative AI helps, but looking also at B2B, business to business, in particular to the area of software as a service. So of course, AI is really rapidly, or especially generative AI, rapidly innovating software as we speak, and helps us to develop also faster as engineers. So with agentic AI and new concepts of MCP, and maybe you can quickly explain what that means. There is, as you called it in one of your articles recently, a bit of a potential death towards software as a service. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think there's a few overlapping trends that are enabled by, let's say, broadly generative AI. It turns out the sort of primary skill of these LLMs by design is software development. So if you look at like the different kinds of things you can do with AI right now, software development is probably like the most commercially strong or like viable skill that they have. And so I think that plays out in a way where a lot of companies will be tempted to create more software because they can. So let's say if you're a SaaS provider and your only functionality you're providing is some kind of pure software, maybe some simple CRM tool. Maybe it's for fintech, maybe it's for like, wealth managers, but it's some like very, in the end of the day, simple software. Elegant, but simple. I think currently a lot of companies would pay a lot of money for this because like, even if it's a simple software, they just like don't have the knowledge or ability or budgets to like, oh, I'm going to build my own CRM. So they just search for whatever's out there. And that's why there's so much investment and so many founders in sort of the SaaS business. And I think with AI being able to generate software and write software so competently, a lot of companies will start to ask this kind of question. Well, I'm paying these, guys $2,000 a month. How hard can it be? Could I just create my own CRM? Because we have some very, I don't use all these 150 features. I only use a few basic things, right? So I think that temptation is there. So I think it's actually already driving investment away from sort of traditional horizontal SaaS. Mm-hmm. So a lot of VCs are also using this kind of language where they are now more excited about either AI agents. Well, actually, maybe AI agents is what they say, but what they actually mean is something like vertical SaaS. So this will not really disrupt, let's say, somebody like a Stripe, because this is not a simple piece of software which you could generate or vibe code with AI. So there's a sort of element of risk and compliance, which is managed by the vendor on your behalf. So you don't need to worry about payments fraud or these kind of things. It's all managed, and that's why you pay the transaction fees. And so I think a lot of founders are moving away from horizontal SaaS into like vertical SaaS, and that definitely applies into fintech and wealth management, et cetera. So I think it kind of changes the shape of the market. And then things like you mentioned, MCP, Model Context Protocol, is just going to be a way for, let's say, companies who maybe want to use AI agents or develop their own software solutions can more easily plug into existing systems of record, for example. So you don't need to build a custom Salesforce integration or custom, I don't know, Notion, or pick any kind of tools which a lot of people are now using to manage different kinds of information across the enterprise. For the most part, there already exists these MCP servers, which is just makes it easier to plug them into your, let's say, AI solutions or AI agents. So then the agent can say, hey, okay, the user is asking me to process or check this status of this opportunity. Oh, I guess I should look this up in Salesforce. So then I can use this Salesforce MCP server to make this query on behalf of the user, get this information, return it, look at it, process it, and then say, oh, well, I guess, this has been not updated since, last October. Do you want to see the emails or something like this? So it facilitates these kind of more complex interactions that go across many systems of record, but allow the user not to think about this. Like the user doesn't need to think, where's this information? How do I access it? It's somehow all managed by the AI. So I think this works on the B2B side, but I also think it's very relevant for the B2C side. Again, with this idea that why do I need to manage, as you said, I've got some insurance policies in different places, and some I have logins. Otherwise, I bought 10 years ago. I have no idea. Maybe there's some email or some record, or maybe every year they send me some statement by post. And then I've got some investments. I've got some crypto stuff. Wouldn't you, in some sense, just want to have your own kind of C3PO where it's just has access to everything and just say hey, what am I getting wrong? What have I forgotten? Is this optimal? Should I get rid of something? Do I have big gaps that I actually need some insurance, which I don't have, or so on? Just sort of help me do the right thing, the basics. That's, I think, where AI, let's say in the next couple of years, I think this will be completely normalized. So maybe from your banks, they will offer these kind of services to connect everything, a little bit like personal finance management apps, PFM, which also I think failed to a large degree. I think now they're going to be kind of AI driven. And then I think even ChatGPT, I wouldn't be surprised if people sort of click a little button and it says, connect my credit cards, connect my bank accounts, privacy, don't care about it. That's been proven so many times with Facebook, Instagram, all these companies. If there's a trade-off where you can just click a button to give OpenAI access to all your bank accounts, most people just click it, never think twice, because the convenience, right?
Exactly.
Immediately I get insights, recommendations, fantastic.
Yeah, and even client onboarding where you have a lot of documents to sign and you can just basically get it all into a data dump, one store, and it summarizes it all well and does the checks and balances and so on, instead of a complex workflow going through different screens with lots of forms. So already when coming to Singapore, landing here with the arrival card, you could just scan your passport and it already pre-fills. Ideally, you can then also just take a picture of your ticket and also of your other documents, and you don't need to fill any forms anymore.
Yeah, I think largely it's based on facial recognition, which is a little bit scary, but it's very effective. And so you just walk in and out of the country, and you just have to remember to actually bring your passport.
Exactly, and with Google Glasses, where it recognizes where you're going and so on. So maybe towards the last element, then also forward-looking towards the scary world of AGI. Maybe you can spread a bit light on where we are today and might be in the future. I know we probably don't have time to go into all kind of details, but just give an overview.
Yeah, so I do see that this place where we're at now, where AI agents are becoming very popular, and you see the AI labs initially launching a lot of these software coding agents, which are again commercially very viable and accessible, right? I think we're going to see similar AI agents in sales, marketing, lawyers, accountants, probably offered a lot by these AI labs directly to businesses and consumers. And I think that is already on the doorstep of AGI, because I think the AGI question, everybody should ask is like, what is my personal AGI? Where you really wouldn't be able to make use of a more intelligent AI at that point, right? Like some people say, oh, like, is it inventing new science? But like, are you a scientist? If you're not a scientist, why do you need an Einstein AI? Probably for your life to change materially, it's maybe a little bit closer to this kind of C3PO scenario where you just have an AI which is able to see what you're doing in your life, just read your emails, files, etc., look at what you're doing at your job, on your laptop, on your phone, and just sort of give you feedback and advice and recommendations for everything. Like, I think that's not very far at all, because most people's jobs are not that complicated. They're mostly just messy, meaning there's a lot of like details everywhere. And once AI can get a sort of handle of that, I think that is AGI. And as said, that's kind of a big topic, right? Because then that could go many different ways. It could go very smoothly in some sense, that this AI just stays as a sort of tool that we use, and more or less everything stays the same. Everybody's just more productive, and companies are growing and economies are growing because everybody just gets done so much more. But you don't have this maybe like mass unemployment, etc. But this is also like looming in the background, is this question that, let's say, we've already seen some famous like entrepreneurs comment about this, some big CEOs in the US especially, that like, do we need to keep hiring people for certain kinds of roles or not? So I think there's been some back and forth. It's not super clear that it's going to be one way or the other, and there could be some local pockets where we go one way and other places we go another. But I think this is sort of the big question, because people need to keep busy. It's not just, I think, even about sharing the upside of AI, growth. Because if you just get some social security paycheck from the government, that could be a nice vacation for a while. But then at some point, you really have to wonder, like, what's the point of being? What's left for you to do? Are you a consumer? Is that what's left? That you have some pocket money and you get to decide whether you spend it on, Amazon or Apple or Tesla or something like this. And it's quite like dystopian. It reminds you of like WALL-E or these kind of scenarios exactly, where people are just there hanging out but don't know anything. They just consume. So I don't like that version of the future. And so that's, I think, the one thing that I really worry about with AI is that, like, who's in control of that, how things play out? Is it a government thing? Is it Sam Altman and Elon Musk who get to decide? Is it Trump? Is it every government? This we will see, I think, now before 2030. It seemed quite clear from everybody that sort of is on the inside of this. That's what people are talking about. It's sometime up to 2030. It's not 2100 anymore like it used to be 10 years ago. It's really like the next couple of years we're going to be in that space where those questions are relevant. Again, your definition might be a little bit different. Some people might say AGI is here today. Some people might say it's never. But again, as sort of large distribution, we are entering that discussion in the next few years.
Yeah, to unpack these very, very important elements here, Satya Nadella, Microsoft CEO, also just said that actually the economical impact is a very important element to talk about the AGI in a sense of the consumers. As you said before, they're very important. There's no GDP growth without the consumers consuming. So you have to, of course, keep consuming. The Wall-E example would be, of course, an interesting one if people are only consuming but not contributing, working anymore. But definitely that economical impact needs to be seen and felt to also have to really a clear conclusion on AGI also in technical terms. But it's really moving so fast that I'm sure in the next month or it's definitely more months than years we will see it. We are on time. I know this is a very exciting topic and I would love to keep talking about it, but maybe in the next episode. Before we close, where can people find you online?
Yeah, so I'm mostly active on Twitter. Substack is where I do my writing, and then sort of a little bit on and off on LinkedIn. But I think if you find me in any of those, they're somewhat interconnected. So you can see me there.
I highly recommend following you on Substack. I was just looking at a few recent articles. Also, your book, of course, on Robo-advisors, even though there have been good and bad stories on Robo-advisory, but definitely great learnings there. So thank you so much for joining us. You find us, of course, on LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify with Pulse Check podcast of Synpulse 8. So once again, thanks, Aki Ranin, and hope to speak soon again.
Thank you. Likewise.